Hey everybody, Andy Kvernen here with another Cornerstone Connection Daily Devotional. You know, I was thinking recently about what it means to have faith in Jesus. And if I'm honest, for me as a pastor, it's really easy to slip into faith in terms of merely what I believe. Now, what I believe is fiercely important, and I want you to hear that from me up front. Doctrine is a big deal. It's a big deal to God. God says so in His Word. It's a big deal to us as Christ followers. What we believe is critical as it relates to what we do. And so our faith is rooted in what we believe to be true about God, about His Word, about His Son Jesus, about His death, His resurrection, His second coming. These things are central to our faith. But if I'm not careful, it's very easy to slip into a mindset that my faith is limited only to what I believe to be true about God and His Word. But in Scripture, especially in the Gospels, there are these wonderful demonstrations of faith that challenge me, and I hope challenge you today, to think in terms of faith, not simply as a proposition, not simply as that which I believe, that doctrine, but also in that which I put my actual trust in. What am I trusting God for in a way that brings me to brass tacks, that brings me to, hey, put your money where your mouth is, if you will. And there's this great story in the Gospel of Mark where a woman comes to Jesus and she demonstrates faith in an unexpected way. I want you to listen to this. This is Mark chapter 5, starting in verse 24. It says, "And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him." And this is as Jesus is on his way to meet the needs of Jairus and his daughter. Jairus, a ruler of the synagogue, comes to Jesus, says, "Jesus, would you come, and my daughter's sick and you can heal her. Would you come to my home and would you do that?" And so Jesus follows Jairus. But along the way, this is what happens. A great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years and who suffered much under many physicians and had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garments. For she said, "Even if I touch his garments, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, listen to what he said. This is fascinating. I love this. He said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." I love how this presses my paradigms in thinking that faith is somehow limited to my doctrinal stance on this or that my faith is limited to a series of propositions about what I believe. My faith is that, but it needs to be more than that. And this woman challenges me. Here she was struggling with a disease for many, many years. She had no opportunity to be near Jesus. She had no opportunity to have access to resources that the religious elite might have offered in those days. She simply pressed in the middle of the crowd and thought, you know what, if I can just touch his robe, if I can just touch his garment, I'll be healed. And so she does. She presses in and she reaches out and she touches Jesus in faith. And of course, Jesus heals her. Now, Jesus didn't have to heal her, and the things that we trust God for aren't mandates for God. God doesn't have to do that which we ask of Him. God hears us in our prayers, and He always answers our prayers, but He sometimes answers them in different ways. But here's the fact, here's the truth. God delights in responding to the faith of His people, especially faith that's offered in good faith, a faith that's offered in trusting Jesus for who He is. And I think that's what's happening here. And so when Jesus responds to the woman, He knows that healing has gone out of him. He says to the woman as she confesses to Him in fear and trembling, the text says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." I wonder today, what are you trusting God for? How are you demonstrating faith, not just in a series of propositions, but in brass tacks? What are you believing God for? Maybe it's something in your marriage. Maybe you need to have faith that God will intervene and work in your marriage. Ask Him for it. Reach out, touch Him, and say, "Lord, would you bring healing here?" Maybe it's something in your home. Maybe it's a physical illness, and you need to have a sense that God is with you in the midst of those things. Maybe you're needing to have faith for a loved one who doesn't yet know Jesus. I don't know how God is going to answer each one of those things, but here's what I do know. God delights when we put our unequivocal trust in Him. How are you putting your unequivocal trust in Jesus today? Let's have faith in him. God bless you, friends.